Now, it is important that we watch what politicians do, not what they say, especially when they make key promises at elections. Australians put their trust in our leaders to follow through on what they promise will make their lives better. And this Prime Minister and his government made a very clear promise back in May last year, and that was that while the cost of everything was going up, a Labor government will lower the cost of living. No ifs, no buts, no asterisks, no only for some, not for others. The promise couldn't be clearer. The reality, of course, is that everything has gone up since they made that promise, a promise that is broken every single time you have to pay more for what you used to pay less for. We've been relentless, night after night, week after week, month after month. When everyone else thinks the big political issue is something else, somewhere else, or anything else, we keep talking about it. Because to the millions of people who are asked to hire or fire a government, trust ultimately matters. And the trust when it comes to cost of living comes at a financial cost, but it also comes at a cost of trust. So the Prime Minister, of course, this week woke up to 50-50 in news poll. He thought he could brush it off. But he woke up this morning to the Turnbull Times with a screaming headline. Most voters now disapprove of Anthony Albanese's performance as Prime Minister. And deeper in the same polling today is that now 51%, a majority of Australians, believe that the country is headed in the wrong direction, that we are headed on the wrong track. We also learned today that 50% of Australians feel that they are worse off financially under this government. Why? Because of cost of living. Despite the promise that was made, the promise that has not been kept, we are told day after day, we are gaslighted, we are lied to, as this government pretends that they have done something for the majority of Australians who trusted them with either their first preference or their second preference to become the government of Australia. Now, the reality is that despite the promise of making things cheaper, you know that everything costs more. In no particular order. On this government's watch, petrol has hit record highs. More than $2 a litre, and in fact in the last month, it's been up 19.7%. The government is in a position to bring that price down by reducing the amount of tax that they make off petrol. It would, of course, cost $3 billion to cut it by 25 cents, yet the Treasurer refuses to do it. Yet he says he feels your pain. Yet he says they understand cost of living, that cost of living is the first, second and third priority of the government. Well, if it was, they would have cut petrol tax by now, or they'll definitely cut it tomorrow. But for some arrogant reason, they won't. Then there's electricity bills. Again, while headline inflation overall is about 5 and a bit percent, electricity has gone up by 18% in the past month, according to the monthly inflation statistics which are provided to us by the Australian Bureau of Statistics. Not some far right-wing think tank, not somebody who's anti-climate change, but the reality is that despite a promise by 2025, which is fast approaching, of your bills going down by $275 based off what they were in May of 22, the reality is they have gone up and they continue to go up. And of course, this is because of the policies of this government. Now, Australians have always said that they demand more action on climate change, but they've also said that they're not willing to pay for it. But you are paying for it. You're paying for it every month, every quarter, with every bill as we transition from the system that used to work to the one that will make us feel better, but not actually change the weather, because China and the rest of the world produce way more than we do. We produce just 1 and a bit % of the global CO2 problem. And again, Chris Bowen, knowing that your electricity bills have gone up and up and up and up and up for the full 18 months of this government, he is planning to spend billions, tens of billions of dollars of your money, but you'll never know how much he's spending because he'll do a whole series of private deals with companies to build more reliable, renewable energy. At times, of course, that's a contradiction. And then, of course, there's what's happening right now in our supermarkets. Now, again, the reality of where we sit right now is that bread and cereal is up 9%. That's just in the past month compared to the same time last year. Dairy and related products is up 8%. Food products overall are up the best part of 7%. The only good news is fruit and veg has started to go backwards, but that's after the record highs after the floods. But believe it or not, the federal government also has a say in how expensive things are at the supermarket. From the fruit and veg that thankfully is going down to the stuff that you buy in a packet, or the stuff that may well have been slaughtered just a few weeks earlier. In fact, in the federal budget of this year, something that we noticed, but also many didn't, was a way that they were going to get more revenue to go on top of the surplus that comes as a result of the resources sector and the profit out of the Future Fund, managed by, of course, Peter Costello, to make sure that they can pay for the superannuation of the ever-growing public service. There was, and the ATO confirms this, an increase to the road user charge if you are a heavy vehicle, i.e. one of the many thousands and thousands and thousands of vehicles that move things from warehouses to shops, from farms to warehouses, from those warehouses again to shops. There is nothing in Australia that naturally occurs in a shop. It all has to be moved, and it all has to be moved largely by heavy vehicles. Now, the results of this have been that every single truck is going to have to pay more to stay on the road. As the local paper in and around the Gippsland region in Victoria, they came in and had a look at a very specific example from store transport. Now, what's going to happen starting now is that the user charge will go from 27.2 cents per litre of diesel up to 32.4 cents a litre. It's going up by a significant margin. Now, on the back of the envelope calculation, which was done by the South Gippsland-based transport operator, Stuart Store of Store Transport, he says the 5.2% levy increase costs him an upwards of $40,000 a year. And that's one bloke. One bloke, one company, and the same is over and over again for every single heavy vehicle that you see on the road. That is not the Ukraine war. That is not Israel and Hamas. That is Grim Jim and Albanese searching for more revenue to pump up their federal budget. And of course, the reality is that every single dollar of increased cost in transport has to be paid for by someone. It's paid for by the people who end up loading on the back of the trucks their product, or the stores at which it gets dropped off. And the reality now is that truck drivers are starting to say that it's easier to go on the dole than to actually absorb this heavy vehicle increase.